completely different than regular sourdough. Get everything you know about sourdough and relearn this, okay? Gluten-free sourdough starter. It is made with brown rice flour, buckwheat flour, sorghum, millet, a mixture of different grains, gluten-free grains. Favorite for feeding my starter, buckwheat. I do have a grain mill, so to mill my grains fresh because I know what's in it and it has all the nutrients in them, because they will actually lose most of their nutrient value within 24 to 48 hours of milling. So if I buy a packet from the store of, gluten-free flour, this was milled who knows how long ago, okay? I could probably find the date if I looked on here. But there's pretty much no nutritional value left in this, so which is fine if you don't have a mill, and that's great, but just part of my focus and for myself and my family is to get nutrient-dense food. So I prefer to grind my own grains. So this is buckwheat, and that's my favorite for feeding the starter. Each grain has different, just like regular flour, absorbs water differently. Sorghum grains, definitely, and buckwheat are definitely a little bit heavier. So when a lot more water, just a heavier grain and flour. So whenever you go to feed your starter, you will notice that whenever you feed it with those heavier grains like sorghum and buckwheat, and a little brown rice, not quite as much with brown rice, but it won't quite double in size like you're used to with your regular sourdough starter. With your regular sourdough, you're used to a big, fluffy, triple rise, and it's just beautiful, fluffy, gluten-free. It's got no gluten, okay? So it's not gonna quite look like that. Yes, it will still rise and it'll get fluffy, but it's not the same. So get that image out of your head. If you really like that big, fluffy, light look, you can choose to feed your starter with a millet. Millet is a lighter, fluffier, not as heavy grain. So whenever you feed it, it will, since it's not so heavy, it will allow it to rise and get fluffier more. So you could use millet if you want to. Millet is more of a slightly sweeter, nuttier flour and grain. So it has a really good flavor. So I want to use this in my actual bread recipe, not necessarily only to feed my starter. So I like to feed my starter with the heavier grains like buckwheat and sorghum because they have a lot more oomph to them. Then, and of course I'm gonna use some sorghum in my recipe as well. But for buckwheat specifically is a very strong flavor, and I don't want, which I like, but it's a little bit more of an acquired taste. So if you don't like that strong flavor, I definitely don't suggest using buckwheat as far as in your recipe, part of the flour in your recipe. But use this, it's a great grain to feed your starter. It gives it so much food and nutrients for your starter, and it just rises beautifully with buckwheat. Getting ready to make a gluten-free loaf now, and I will show you how I do it. Well, first step is to feed my starter, and I its peak around 4 hours. And it is so important with gluten-free, you have to use a strong starter at peak, no exceptions. Trust me, I have experimented, and with regular sourdough, it doesn't have to be at peak. You can play with it. It has a lot more wiggle room. No, not gluten-free. It must be at peak no matter what. So do not commit to making a gluten-free sourdough loaf unless you are ready to be here. Not flexible, okay? It's very finicky, and it will completely ruin all your hard work and expensive grains if you aren't just focused on it. So I will just go ahead and preface with be ready. So let's go mill some buckwheat so I can feed my starter. This is the grain mill I have. This is just the Nutri-Mill Classic grain mill. And yes, I bring it outside because I don't want to get flour everywhere. But whatever grain you have, just make sure it's on the finest possible. Gluten-free is already heavy and dense enough as it is because there's no gluten. So you really want a really very fine flour for gluten-free bread baking. So here's what the buckwheat looks like. There's your often called buckwheat groats. There's just the full grain. They're not flattened like oatmeal. It's the actual whole. I only like to mill just a little at a time because I'm not going to use all of it, and I don't want it to lose its nutrient density. Okay, you see why I like to do this outside? I forgot to make sure this was all the way pushed in. See where it says yes and no? If it's not all the way where it says yes, all the grain will fall out, and I just made a mess. So thank goodness it was outside and I can sweep it off. Get it again. All right, it happens pretty quickly. So this is about all I need. to feed my starter, and probably a little more, but it's just a beautiful whole grain. I love it. So another thing to remember with gluten-free is that it tends to mold a lot faster and easier than regular sourdough starter. Once you have a regular sourdough starter going, it's pretty hard to kill unless you leave it at room temperature and don't feed it, right? Gluten-free will mold a lot easier than regular. So always start with a clean bowl, clean spoon, clean everything. If this was a regular sourdough, I'd probably feed it in the same bowl. No. Use a clean, fresh bowl every single time to reduce your chances of mold growth. So my sourdough sandwich recipe requires 300 grams of active sourdough starter. So you really want to feed it pretty much a 1-1-1 ratio, not exact, but I start off close to 1-1-1. So if I want 300 grams, this is actually just cold from being in the fridge. And you will notice if it's been in the fridge unfed, like this one has been for about a week, you notice it will kind of grow like a slight little gray layer at the top. Like look underneath, lighter, and then here it's kind of darker gray. So I'm going to just gently take that top layer off so I can get the freshest underneath. Good enough. Now, I'm not sure how much is in here. I fed this right before I put it in the fridge last time for how much was in there. So I'm just going to measure it and see what I'm working with. Oops. 135. So that's my starting point. Whole fresh made grains will absorb a lot more water. So and you want it naturally a bit thicker. If you notice, this is actually really thick. So the thicker the starter for gluten-free, actually the better, okay? So I like it thicker, so I'm gonna add less water than flour. And that's okay, that's good, okay? So and I know I have about 135 of my starter in here. So I'm gonna start off with about 110 of water and then 135 of flour, and I'll kind of just check the consistency and go from there. Filtered water. Said I was going to start off with about 110. I have to put my water in first. Stir it in. Now that I have a nice smooth texture, I'm going to go in with my flour. This is the buckwheat I just milled, so I'm going to start off with probably about 130. Stir this in and check for the consistency. You know, so this actually absorbed a lot more than I expected, so I'm going to add a tiny bit more water. I know it's thick, but this is the starter, okay? Now, if my dough was this thick, that would not be okay. But for the starter, you want this thicker structure. So that's what we're looking for. It's definitely thicker than pancake batter. That's what you're looking for. I'm gonna spritz it with some water just to let it help it expand. And I'm gonna mark my starting point. Keep this in a really warm spot. Steady, warm temperature is key in gluten-free sourdough. So I'm gonna stick this in the oven with my light on, and it should be at peak in right about 4 hours. All right, while my starter is rising, I'm gonna go ahead and measure all the different flours that I need for my recipe. So first I'm going to start off with my millet flour, 150 grams, which is about a cup of sorghum flour. Now, gluten-free is also about this perfect blend of grains and starches. So I've played around with several different recipes, and everyone likes their bread different. So this is the one that I like. It is a little bit more dense. It's not going to be a super light and fluffy one, but honestly, I like this one the best. So this is the perfect balance that I like. Next is arrowroot flour or tapioca flour or tapioca starch. Get potato starch. Honestly, this is just easier to find, so it's just tapioca, which is from the cassava plant, and this is your starch. So the starch is what's going to make it a little bit lighter, airier, and fluffier. So this one, I need 200 grams of my tapioca starch. It's very powdery, so watch when you measure it, because you'll just like inhale all that in. There is going to be some already pre-mixed gluten-free flour. I like Bob's Red Mill the best. Sorry, over King Arthur for the gluten-free, because this one doesn't have any added synthetic vitamins to it. This is literally just white rice flour, brown rice flour, potato starch, sorghum flour, tapioca flour, and xanthan gum. The one from King Arthur has like riboflavin and a bunch of unnecessary stuff, so no thank you. Bob's Red Mill. So there's all my flour blends together. It's this perfect blend of whole grains, to give it some oomph to it, and then the millet to give it some slightly sweeter, better flavor, and then tapioca starch to help it be lighter and fluffier. I'm gonna go ahead and add my salt to my flour blend just so that I don't forget it. I need 25 grams of salt. Starter is rising. I just have all my flour blend already here, nice and mixed, and my salt. Now the other ingredients I have not added yet, of course, is my psyllium husk. This is going to act as our binder, so I still need psyllium husk, some honey, and then of course water and starter. But at least this is ready so that I can just go ahead and dump in once my starter is at peak.